The moon landings were faked. Apollo 11 didn't happen. Humans never set foot on the moon. You might have read these kind of comments online, or maybe you've got into a heated argument with someone about it. Because the moon landing hoax is one of the most popular conspiracy theories of our time. Even Kim Kardashian's been called out for saying it just didn't happen. And that's despite tons of evidence that Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin did land on the moon in 1969, including hundreds of kilos of lunar rock that were collected over several different missions. So why do so many people, including lots of young people, not believe that the moon landings happened? That's what we're going to unpick today on What in the World, your podcast for the stories that get people talking from the BBC World Service, with me, Hannah Gelbart. So to break this down, we have got our reporter Natalia Jimenez joining us from New York. Hey.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And we have Jackie Wakefield, who's our global disinformation reporter, here with me in the studio in London. Hey.
Hello.
So, Natalia, first off with you, where did this idea come from that the moon landings are a hoax?
It's not a new idea. It's not a new conspiracy. It didn't just appear on TikTok. It's actually been part of the conversation for a while, ever since the moon landing happened, the first one in 1969. And to put it in context, this was a time when the trust or kind of mistrust in the government was prevalent. So at the time, the Vietnam War was happening. People thought that the government wasn't being fully honest with the public. So when Bill Kaysing, a writer in the US, published this booklet claiming that NASA faked the moon landings in the 1970s, it kind of sparked debate. And when I say NASA, I mean the US National Aeronautics and Space Administration. So they're kind of the department that takes care of all of the US's space missions. People were wondering, okay, there's no real evidence that's being presented. It's just a set of theories, but could this be possible? Could the moon landing have been filmed in a studio? Maybe Hollywood was part of this. There was no real evidence. It was just theories. And since then, they've kind of all been disproven.
So I want to get into some of those theories now with Jackie. What are the main reasons that people say that the moon landings didn't happen?
So there's a couple of the main theories that you kind of see bouncing around. So the first is that the flag is blowing on the moon. So the flag really shouldn't be moving because you're in space, there's no wind. But what we're actually seeing is the astronauts are twisting the flagpole. So that's why you see some movement in the flag. Then the other thing is the footprints don't match. So people have analysed the spacesuit boot of sorry, people have analysed the spacesuit boot of Neil Armstrong and looked at the footprint, and it doesn't match the footprint that they have seen on the moon.
Why is that then?
It's actually Buzz Aldrin's footprint. So it's a different footprint. But, I mean, correct, wrong person. The next one is you can't see any stars in the picture. And the thought there was, it'd be too difficult to fake the stars because then astronomers would know it's not actually on the moon. But the issue is stars. I don't know if you've ever tried to photograph the night sky before on like your phone or anything.
It never comes out.
It never comes out. So unless you're focusing on the stars specifically, it's not going to come out in the picture. It was also during lunar daytime, so the moon was super bright.
Reflecting the sun.
Exactly. So it means that the brightness of the moon was just drowning out the brightness of the stars. The last one that you see a lot is that Buzz Aldrin himself said it didn't happen. This is actually an out-of-context interview from 2015. So someone asked him why we've not been back to the moon in so long. He gives an answer, and it's essentially been chopped up to make it look like he's saying we've never been to the moon.
So, Natalia, let's get into some of the evidence that it did happen. I mentioned lunar rock. What other evidence is there for this?
So I do want to touch on the lunar rock conspiracy theory, since that's one of the pillars, one of the main kind of arguments that conspiracy theorists have used to disprove that the moon landings actually happened. And the claim here is that they're basically fake. They're quote unquote Earth rocks or meteorites. And that has been, again, debunked. Why? Because these lunar rocks cannot be replicated. They were created under very specific conditions. They don't contain any water. They've been exposed to extreme cosmic radiation. They show impact features, which basically means that the way they're formed is a reflection of them being in a very low gravity environment existing in a vacuum, so no oxygen, atmosphere-free environments, kind of like the fancy word. But these rocks have been examined by not just NASA, but also scientists in Japan, in the UK, in France, in Germany. These scientists really have no stake here. I mean, they have no reason to kind of back up NASA. And kind of we're not part of the space race. So they are real. They've been proven to be real. Also, there are mirrors on the moon, which I just recently discovered that were placed there during several missions, which you can actually kind of reflect things off of. It's kind of a proof that when you reflect something off of those mirrors and it bounces back, that they're actually there. The satellite imagery that goes along with that shows the moon landing locations. There are craters. There is actual physical evidence that we've brought back with us. So that's pretty good proof that U.S. astronauts went to the moon 6 times.
So we heard from Natalia all of that evidence, right? Especially the rock.
We can't forget about the rock.
You can't forget about the rock. So why do some people find this so hard to believe?
I think there's a couple factors here. So the first is, it's the moon, right? It feels so out of reach for so many of us. I think there's this whole idea that, humanity or the US can't solve sometimes the most basic problems. How could they send people to the moon? I think there's also this idea of, it was a competition with the Russians during the Cold War. So I think a lot of people kind of like the narrative that Americans had to make up that they got there in order to seem like they won the space race. But it is important to note that the Russians have acknowledged the US did land there first. So that's another piece of evidence. I think there's also this kind of idea that this mission was such a genuine leap for humanity. It involved hundreds of people, billions of dollars of budget. And I think people are just find that very difficult to believe that humanity could work together so solidly.
Yeah, we hear it all the time, we can put a man on the moon, but we can't solve hunger, homelessness, all of these very, very earthling problems. And this, you guys have both said that these conspiracy theories have been around since 1969, since the first mission. Pretty much people have doubted, and then there was this sense of a lack of trust in institutions, which reminds me a little bit of the environment that we're living in now. And is that why we're seeing a resurgence of these conspiracy theories among younger people?
Yeah, well, we're certainly seeing a huge resurgence. I think there was a survey a couple of years ago that found that moon landing hoaxism was most common amongst young people. So more young people believe that this was faked than any other generation.
How young are we talking?
So 18 to 24-year-olds, but also the group of 24 to 35-year-olds, it was also quite high.
And social media presumably helping that, because it just lets these things spread like wildfire.
Exactly. I think there's a couple factors. The first is it's not in our living memory.
Yes.
And it's also not in a lot of our parents' living memory. So it's quite a far way away. Yes, I think social media has a factor to play. As I mentioned earlier, the idea that you can clip up clips and make evidence out of nothing, and that goes viral on social media. I think there's also an aspect of our generation and younger generations being the hot take generation. There's no hotter take than a conspiracy theory. It's an exciting thing to tell people, and it's an exciting opinion to have, and it's an exciting opinion to share online. Therefore, it just spreads more and more.
Yeah, they do. They generate so much interest, don't they? People who have these slightly radical and share conspiracy theories, they're the ones that stoke emotions and that get so many followers.
Exactly, and evidence-based videos, posts, it's just not as exciting, unfortunately. I know when I go to a party, I'm like, what's my hot take going to be for tonight? And it's always something crazy. I wouldn't go with a very reasonable hot take.
Not talking about 100 kilos of lunar rock. No. Jackie, difficult question for you. How do you speak to people who believe in conspiracy theories that have been disproven?
I think the best way to do it often is just by asking them questions back to them. The evidence that conspiracy theories have fall apart very, very quickly. And as you sort of slowly ask the questions rather than do it in an accusatory way, you're just slowly kind of unfoiling that belief. So that's kind of how I like to do it, is let them come to their own conclusion that perhaps the evidence for their conspiracy is a bit flimsy.
So if we were going to role play that, it would be Why do you believe that?
Yeah. And then as they say each piece of evidence, be like, well, where did you see that? Oh, I saw this clip here. Shall we go watch the full clip?
Of course, it does require you to know all of the ways to debunk that theory. And
that's true.
You can get into some pretty hairy situations.
Definitely. But I think at the end of the day, we've got this great, we've got our phones in our hands. You can check things. There's ways to kind of double check. I think there's also an aspect here of like, how much celebrities and people like Kim Kardashian, whose job it is to make news, how much of it is rage bait? Like, how much is it where, you know, they just want to have an exciting clip? What I also will like to say is that, you know, in order for this conspiracy theory to be real, Russia would have to be in support of it. Hundreds of people. How many people does it take to keep this conspiracy a secret? And is that even possible? Usually no.
Yeah, and there have not been leaks from, you know, no one in the space mission has said, actually, you know, here, finally, I'm gonna speak.
Exactly. There's been no whistleblowers.
There's been no whistleblowers. Guys, thank you both so much for joining me on this episode. It's been great having you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Thank you.
That's it from us, but please do check out some of our other episodes right here on the BBC World Service YouTube channel or wherever you get your BBC podcasts. And while you're here, like, share or comment below. We love reading what you guys have to say. I'm Hannah. This is What's in the World from the BBC World Service. We'll see you next time.